In this section, we're going to take a quick look at correspondence, and this links in with our personal and social capacity, as well as our literacy skills. So when we communicate with professionals in a variety of settings, it's an essential skill, and it's obviously a big part of the literacy and the social capacity capability aspect. We need to know how to communicate correctly with the right people in the right settings. And you can think of it as a bit like being a chameleon or a spy, if you will. And what I mean by that is that a chameleon or a spy can blend into any setting without standing out. You don't want to walk in and make it clear that you don't belong there or that this is not your natural environment. So professional correspondence is very much like this. You need to be able to seamlessly switch between how you would talk or communicate in the yard with your friends to someone in a business or industry. If you walk into a business or company and interview a communication with a staff member or something like that, and you forget to switch between this yard talk, you're immediately going to stand out as this is not a mature, a responsible, a professional kind of person, and you don't want that. You want to fit seamlessly in and be able to communicate effectively without raising any attention to yourself. So there's a variety of settings that we use different language and formalities for, and you need to remember that the language and the words that you use in one statement or one environment may not be appropriate in another. And I'm not talking about just using standard formal language versus using like posh British accents or anything like that. I'm just talking about certain things like using explicit language is a really simple example, but also just the general slang and how you address people. So we've got some examples that I'm going to go through, and as I go through it, I want you to think about which setting might each of these apply to. So firstly, when you meet someone, you might say, "Hey bro, how's it hanging?" You might say, "Hey mate, how are you doing?" Or you could say, "Good morning" or "Good afternoon, how are you?" So of these three things, think about which setting might you use each of these phrases. You can see even down the as we're obviously increasing in formality. Even at the highest tier, we're not being super formal. I'm not saying like, "Good day, sir. How are you on this fine evening?" or anything like that. I'm not using the word chaps, but it's a very neutral language versus calling someone bro and using some slang terms like "how's it hanging" versus just saying "how are you?" So let's look at the three. The first one, it's appropriate for casual or close friends. Absolutely. It is definitely not appropriate for a workplace or a professional setting though. You wouldn't walk into a job, or I would hope you wouldn't walk into a job and speak to a colleague or a boss or an employer and call them bro. Unless you guys are very, very close and they're that kind of person, and then there are exceptions to that, absolutely. But until you've established that relationship, and generally they will instigate that kind of language, you would assume not. To say, "Hey mate, how are you doing?" This is appropriate for casual and close friends again, and it may be appropriate in a professional setting if you know the person fairly well. Especially in Australia, calling someone mate is quite normal and quite acceptable, and a lot of people do it even in professional settings, but you just need to be aware of that. And again, if you're unsure, stick with something a little bit more formal until either they instigate it or you've established that better relationship. You obviously need to link with things like the intercultural capability, because some people may not understand this or they may misinterpret if you call someone mate. Then to say "good morning" or "good afternoon, how are you?" It's appropriate for professional settings and all of the above. So yep, it might be a little bit unusual for your close group of mates if you walk up and you say, "Good morning, so-and-so, how are you?" They might be like, "Why are you talking so formal?" But they're not going to, like, yes, in that case you've stood out, but it's not inappropriate. Whereas to do the other way around, to go, "Hey bro, how it's hanging," in a professional setting, very inappropriate. So you really want to be able to understand which of these can I apply in which sentence. The next example or the next activity that I'm going to give you is about email correspondence. So this kind of language applies with emails. We don't want to be saying "hey" in an email or say "oi teacher" in an email. You want to be able to use the right language. Again, you don't have to be super formal. You don't have to say "Dear so-and-so, dear Mr. Riak." You can just say hi Mr. Riak. But certainly having an introduction is a good formality, particularly with email, even though you know who it's going to and they can see who it's from. It's just a nice formality to say, "Hey so-and-so," and then at the end say "thanks" and your name. Simple things like that, as well as also just having a simple greeting rather than just sending an email that says, "I don't get the work," or "can you help me?" or something like that. You want to really lead them into it. So the activity is going to give you an example and you'll have to rewrite it in different settings from fairly casual to a more professional setting.